Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, I welcome you to the lecture 6th for the subject Education, Globalization and Change. And in this lecture, we are going to start unit 3rd Elements of Change. And its topics 3.1 and 3.2. Those are 3.1 is the nature of change and 3.2 is stages of change, and we are going to discuss these two topics in this lecture. In ad-deena in Allah Islam, truly the religion with Allah is Islam. Surah Ali Imran, and its ayat is 19. And the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, to abuse a Muslim is a sin and to fight him is unbelief. तो ये बुखारी शरीफ में हदीस है कि किसी मुसलमान को गाली देना गुनाह है और उसके साथ झगड़ा करना, लड़ाई झगड़ा करना कुफ्र है. So unit 3rd, that's elements of change, and this unit includes 7 topics from 3.1 to 3.7, and those are 3.1 the nature of change, 3.2 stages of change, 3.3 problem solving approaches, 3.4 stages and phased models of changes, 3.5 incremental and radical change, 3.6 strategy development, 3.7 changes as organizational development. So these 7 topics will help us understand elements of change. So in this lecture, we are going to discuss 3.1, the nature of change, and 3.2, stages of change. Let's learn about these two topics in this lecture, and these will help us comprehend elements of change. And this is unit 3rd from the course outline, and we are going to discuss the two topics 3.1 and 3.2 in it. First of all, we talk about the nature of change. That what is the nature of change? In previous lectures, we try to understand in first chapter understanding educational change. We talked about that. After that, in chapter unit 2nd, we talked about uh, educational change, and now we are going to talk about unit 3rd, that's elements of change. So the success of the change is dependent on successful management, and it just not on successful management but also on specific contents and characteristics of the change itself. It depends upon the contents, that what are the contents of that particular change, on which basis the change is standing, change is happening, and what are its characteristics. And its examples are its centrality, that what is its epicenter, its axis around which it revolves, कि वो क्या 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 महवर है जिसके गिर्द ये गर्दिश करता है. So its centrality will decide that it will succeed or fail. So its centrality, how far the change is perceived to alter the core patterns and norms of the institutions, that those norms, those patterns around which those institutions work, those institutions revolve, those institutions work, those institutions run their business. So its centrality will decide that it will succeed or fail. Then its complexity, the second point जो इसमें एग्जांपल्स दी जा रही हैं कि हमारा चेंज जो है वो सक्सेसफुल होगा या फेल होगा, तो इसकी सक्सेस डिपेंड करेगी इस complexity, that how many groups within the institutional setting will be affected by the change and the difficulty or ease of its implementation, that how complex is it, that if it is very difficult to bring change, that the group have very radical and very rigid thoughts or thinking patterns, then there will be no change. It will be difficult for bringing change. So if it is easy and it is uh, easy to understand and people think about it, it is not so much complex, then it is easy, and the nature of the change is that it will succeed. So its nature depends upon its centrality and its complexity. Next point is the nature and amount of the change. It will also decide that our change will succeed, or as we talked in the previous lectures, that change comes because of globalization and the technological advancements and something these. If change is coming, if there is change happening, then its nature and amount of the change will decide its success. The level of difficulty which the innovation has for an individual. मेरा बच्चों आपसे सवाल है कि दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी इजाद क्या है? व्हाट इज द बिगेस्ट इनोवेशन इन द वर्ल्ड? तो मैं बाद में बता भी दूंगा, लेकिन मेरा आपसे ये सवाल है कि आपके ख्याल में, या आपने कमेंट्स में, या जब कभी भी आप सुने, जब भी हमारी बात होगी, तो ये आपने मुझे इसका जवाब देना है कि विच इज़ द बिगेस्ट इन्वेंशन और इनोवेशन इन द वर्ल्ड. So the level of difficulty which the innovation has for an individual, the nature and amount of the change, that if that innovation is easy to use, easy to comprehend, easy to convey, then there will be more change. The next point is the consonance or compatibility, congruence of the change. These are very beautiful words, and these all related to harmony, compatibility, congruence, consonance, that to be in company with someone, to be in harmony, मुताबिकत होना किसी चीज़ से, of the change. The degree of fit between the innovation and the existing institutional practices and values, that if the society is not accepting the technology, accepting the innovation, then there will be lesser change. And if individuals, the degree of fit between the innovation and the existing institutional practices and values, as we talked about globalization and change in previous lectures, that wherever institutions are being affected by globalization and modern technologies, there is more change. And if there is lesser roof for the new, or space for the new innovations and new talk and new ideas, there is lesser uh, change. Next point is the visibility of the change. How far the change is public? Like we are mm, perceiving change, and we are actually feeling change, as the government promised, and you know better that what's going on and what is change, and it is not only of the promises, It should be visible. It should be mm, visible through naked eyes, that people can feel it, people can watch it. So the visibility of the change, it will decide that what's its nature, that it will succeed or it will fail. The communicability of the change, how straightforward the change is to communicate. Communication is a two-way process, and if change is communicated, that this is change and this will happen and this will be the benefit of change, and if that communicability is okay, then there will be change. So thus change depends upon these different examples and these different elements, and these show its nature, that if communicability is more, visibility is more, consonance and compatibility is more, then and its amount of change is more, then there will be successful change. And if we don't succeed in this, then there will be problems. The next that will decide the success of change, the point, the divisibility of the change, the possibility of trialing the change on a partial and limited basis. So divisibility, that we can divide it on lesser and lesser groups, smaller groups, or any segment of society, and we can, like हम पायलट प्रोजेक्ट या पायलट टेस्टिंग करते हैं ना, रिसर्च करने लगे ना, तो अगर ये छोटे पैमाने पे जो है ना अपना असर दिखाए, तो इसका मतलब है ये बड़े पैमाने पे भी अपना, it will show its results on large scale. Next point is the clarity of the proposed change, that it is the rule of the nature that if the things are clear, a clear picture in your mind can create change in the world. A clear picture of anything, of any subject, of any movement, of any book, of any idea can change whole of the world. And the next point is the relative advantage of change over existing practice, that it should have advantage over existing practices, that if the existing practices are receding and they are lagging behind, so people are feeling that there should be change, then there will be change and the relative advantage of the change will be there. There is another point, that the reversibility of the change, the reversibility of the change, that it can be reversed. It should have this property, this characteristic, that it can be reversible. If it is reversible, it is easy to have minimal negative impact of that change, that it has the ability to rewind it also. So its reversibility will also decide its success. So this is the nature of change, that it perhaps have these all qualities, and it will be very useful, that if it has all these qualities and these are impacting the culture of the people and impacting the lives of the people and their traditions, then there will be more change. Next point is the ease of solution that the change presents to a problem, that change always presents solutions to problems, and if it has ease, it can easily solve those problems of a society, of a civilization, of a country, of a city, anything where there is change. So if it can easily solve those issues, then there will be more chances of change prevailing, of prevailing the change. The scale of the benefit that the change brings. That if people see that, or they feel that there will be benefit of the change and the change will bring those benefits for them, then there will be more change. The contribution to the overall vision of the organization that the change will bring. So change will be in any organization, in any society, in any country, wherever there will be, it will contribute to overall vision of the organization, then that will bring change. Next point is the specificity and concreteness of the change proposals. That these proposals must be specific, to the point, brief, and concrete, and these should have good and stable foundations. Because if the proposal is not up to the mark and it is not standardized and it is not in concrete, it can be failed. So these all points relate to the change as successful. That if these qualities are present in the change, then it will flourish, it will usher in the society. And there are other points as well regarding the nature of change. That change is likely to be successful if it is, that if it has following qualities: that congruent with existing practices in the school. That if schools it is congruent, it has harmony with the existing practices, then it can be successful. How? Because the whole of the nation sends its children to the schools, and schools ultimately produce the citizens. The schools train them. Thus, if it is congruent, it is in harmony with, it is according to those standards, those existing practices in the schools, then there will be more chances of changes, that change is likely to be successful. Next point is understood and communicated effectively. The very important topic, that first it should be understood, and then if it is communicated effectively, then it can be successful. So change must have this nature, change must have this quality, so that it can be understood and communicated to the other members of the society. Then trialable and trialed. This is very significant point regarding change, that it should be it can be, or it should be, it must be trialable. That it can be tried, it can be tested at any time, and it must be tested already. So is it trialable and trialed? If it is successful. Next point is seen to be an improvement on existing practice by the participants. That participant see, they perceive, they feel that it is improving, or it will improve the existing practices, so it can be successful. Next point is seen to further the direction in which the institution is moving. That change help the institution in further moving in the direction in which it is always already moving. So this help, or this guidance in the further direction, it will, to the institution, it will be helpful for the flourishing of change. So these 5 points will help change to be likely successful. On the other hand, change is likely to be unsuccessful if it is. First point is over complex, not understood. So over complex, complex होना कोई बुरी बात नहीं है, but over complex बहुत ज़्यादा टफ होना, बहुत ज़्यादा मुश्किल होना, to be very very much difficult and to be not understood, it will lead it to failure. Then if it is poorly communicated, on the other hand, then change is likely to be unsuccessful. Next point is over demanding on the individuals and existing resources, that it demands more individuals and more resources, it will also meet failure. Next point is unclear, very simple but very authentic and relevant point, that if it is unclear, it will also meet or embrace failure. Next point is untested, particularly if it will affect large numbers of people, that it is untested and it fails its test in its test and it affects large numbers of people, then it will also fail. So these were 5 points regarding the failure of the change if it has these characteristics. Of questionable benefit over existing practices, that we can't understand its benefits, then it will also be unsuccessful, unclear on its benefit in meeting the institution's general direction, that it will also not be successful in the form of if it is generally not guiding the institution in the right direction. Next point is too incompatible with the existing practices, values, and beliefs of the organization and the people in it. And if we talked about earlier in this lecture that if it is congruent, compatible, then it will successful. If it is incompatible, it will not successful. And brought in without real consultation, that if it is not brought with consultation, then it will also embrace failure. So these are the points about the nature of change, that what type of change will successful and what type of change will be unsuccessful. So I hope that you have understood and you have learned this lecture, and it will help you understand unit 3 elements of change. Our next topic, which we have to discuss in this lecture, stages of change. So one can identify several stages to change. Those may be in invention, development, diffusion, dissemination, adoption, implementation, institutionalization, recommendation. So Fullen identifies the phases of initiation, that's mobilization, adoption. Second is implementation, means initial use. Third is continuation, incorporation, routinization, institutionalization. These are very technical terms, but not too much difficult there to understand. These are easy, and I will explain you these terms. That he adds a fourth stage of outcome to complete the overview of the change process. So if we talk about these words, initiation means to initiate something, किसी चीज़ को शुरू करना, to mobilize resources to adopt something. Then we talk about implementation, that when we implement, we enact something. जैसे हम कानून नाफिज करते हैं, तो किसी चीज़ को आपने पहले इनिशिएट किया, फिर उसको इम्प्लीमेंट कर दिया, देन कंटिन्यूएशन, और फिर उसको जारी रखना, उसको कंटिन्यू रखना, उस पर हम बात करेंगे. ही एट द फर्दर स्टेज ऑफ आउटकम टू कंप्लीट द ओवरव्यू ऑफ द चेंज प्रोसेस. तो वो जो है ना वो ओवरव्यू ऑफ द चेंज प्रोसेस को जो है ना वो इसको आउटकम टू कंप्लीट कि इन स्टेजेस का जो है ना वो फ़ायदा क्या होता है उसको हम ओवरऑल जब देखेंगे तो वो स्टेज 4 उसको ऐड करता है. बाकी इसके ऊपर जो टर्म दी गई, इन्वेंशन, डेवलपमेंट, डिफ्यूजन, डिससेमिनेशन, अडॉप्शन, इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, institutionalization and recommendation, these terms will be explained in the next slides. So one can expand on this by suggesting a 7 stage model of change. मतलब जो फुलन ने मॉडल दिया है उसको हम मज़ीद एक्सप्लेन कर सकते हैं. दैट देयर यहाँ पे एरोज शो दैट these are 7 stages and this is a model. So first of all there is invention, that in any change, as we are discussing stages of change, so first stage is invention, that there is an invention, कि कोई इजाद हुई है, कोई नई चीज़ दरियाफ्त, दरियाफ्त तो नहीं हम कह सकते, हम यहाँ पर चूंकि इन्वेंशन की बात कर रहे हैं. सो डिस्कवरी और इन्वेंशन में बहुत ज़्यादा फ़र्क है. डिस्कवरी होती है कि जो पहले से मौजूद चीज़ें हैं उनमें से कुछ आपको मिल जाए, जैसे कोलंबस ने अमेरिका डिस्कवर किया था, इन्वेंट नहीं किया था. जबकि कार, मोटरसाइकिल, जहाज़, ये वो, ये सारी चीज़ें जो है जितनी भी इस वक्त हमें फैसिलिटीज़ मिल रही हैं, तो दुनिया की सबसे बड़ी ईजाद, इन्वेंशन इज़ व्हील, WHEEL, व्हील, पहिया. सो इन्वेंशन, तो पहिया आया तो दुनिया में जो इनकलाब चेंज आया है वो आपके सामने है कि फासले कितने सिमट के रह गए हैं. ग्लोबलाइजेशन में उसका भी एक बड़ा हाथ है, वो हम इंशाल्लाह डिस्कस करेंगे. तो इन्वेंशन, इन्वेंशन, नेक्स्ट स्टेज इज़ डेवलपमेंट. सो आपने इन्वेंशन की, उसके बाद कोई डेवलपमेंट हुई, तरक्की हुई, कुछ फ़ायदा हुआ. देन डिफ्यूजन, डिससेमिनेशन. डिफ्यूजन का मतलब है कि जहाँ पर कोई चीज़ ज़्यादा हो उसका, जैसे पानी जो है ना वो ऊंचे इलाकों से नीचे इलाकों की तरफ बहता है, तो ऐसे उसको हम, इस प्रोसेस को हम कहते हैं डिफ्यूजन, कि जिस जगह पे कोई चीज़ ज़्यादा है तो उसका जहाँ पे कम है उसकी तरफ फैल जाना, तो डिससेमिनेशन, फैलना. नेक्स्ट है अडॉप्शन. अडॉप्शन में कुछ स्टेजेस, उन्होंने सब स्टेजेस बयान की गई हैं जो कि यहाँ पर ब्रैकेट्स के अंदर दिए. तो उनमें अडॉप्शन में अडॉप्ट करना, किसी चीज़ को इख्तियार करना, इसमें अवेयरनेस, इंटरेस्ट, इवेलुएशन, ट्रायल, अडॉप्शन और रिजेक्शन. सो दीज और द सब स्टेजेस ऑफ अडॉप्शन. अवेयरनेस, किसी चीज़ से वाकफियत, इंटरेस्ट, किसी चीज़ में दिलचस्पी लेना, इवेलुएशन जो है तज्जिया, ट्रायल, किसी चीज़ को टेस्ट करना, अडॉप्शन या रिजेक्शन, या तो आप उसको रख लेंगे या फिर रिजेक्ट कर देंगे. सो इम्प्लीमेंटेशन, उसको फिर नाफिज कर देना है, ऐसा नहीं, ठीक है. उसके बाद फिर इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइजेशन, किसी चीज़ को इंस्टीट्यूशनलाइज करना, उसको नॉर्म बना देना, उसको एक प्रैक्टिस बना देना, सेट कर देना. देन देयर इज लास्ट स्टेप इज, लास्ट स्टेज इज रिकमेंडेशन. सो वन कैन एक्सपेंड ऑन दिस by suggesting a 7 stage model of change. So this is 7 stage model of change. Invention first, development, diffusion or dissemination, adoption, implementation, institutionalization and recommendations. These are 7 stages and this is known as a 7 stage model of change, and this is suggested by different thinkers. Though this sequence is typical of the research, development and diffusion model, it can apply with modifications to a bottom-up problem-solving action research model of change. That this concept, the model we have discussed in the previous slide, this is related to research, development and diffusion, RD&D model, and with modifications we can use it to a bottom-up problem solving action research model of change. So bottom-up model means that in which we go from specific to general, that we Like if a company is there and that corporation, company, something organization, it has top level administration, then there is management, then there are workers. So when we consider the workers and the lower management, the part of that organization, and we take help and we discuss our problems with the lower staff and management, then we can say that there is bottom up approach. So problem solving action research, that wherever we find we are stuck in any problem, then we can use that problem solving action research model of change. The management of an innovation has to plan for each stage of the innovation. It means that the management of innovation has to plan for each stage of the innovation. That if you are going to innovate something, you have to plan for each stage of that innovation, that how it will be created or invented, and then what will be its impact, and then if it encounters a problem, what can we do after that. This might entail identifying uh, first the tasks to be accomplished at each stage. That if we talk about that we invent something or innovate something and we are talking about that, then we can say that the tasks to be accomplished at each stage, what actually has to change, that we consider these ingredients which are we are going to talk about. The roles and tasks of participants, facilitating factors at each stage, and fourth is inhibiting factors at each stage. That first of all we talk about the tasks to be accomplished at each stage. Second is the roles and tasks of participants, that participant, what will the participants do, facilitating factors at each stage, that different factors which will affect and which will be affected, those to facilitate those factors at each stage. So we have to consider each stage in this uh, innovation for bringing change. Inhibiting factors at each stage, that what are the inhibiting factors, that these are the actual factors which host, जो मेज़बान होते हैं उस चेंज के हर स्टेज में, उनकी हम बात कर रहे हैं. तो इनहिबिट करना, किसी जगह पर रहाइश पजीर होना, तो यहाँ पर इनसे मुराद वो फैक्टर्स हैं जिनके ऊपर जो है ना वो चेंज ने आना होता है. नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इज द स्ट्रेटजीज टू बी यूज टू एड्रेस द इनहिबिटिंग फैक्टर्स. तो उन फैक्टर्स को हम जो है ना वो कैसे एड्रेस कर सकते हैं, उन पर भी हम बात करेंगे. सो व्हाट माइट बी द इनहिबिटिंग फैक्टर्स. So inhibiting factors are the factors which inhibit or which create hurdles, the obstacles. ये वो factors हैं, मैं पीछे थोड़ा सा confused हुआ था कि ये inhibiting factors जो हैं ये रोकते हैं, these create hurdles. So इसको correct कर लीजिएगा. तो इन फैक्टर्स को हम जो है ना वो कैसे हर प्रोसेस पे जो हर्डल्स आती हैं उनको हमने कैसे जो है ना वो काउंटर करना है. मैं जो है ना इसको हैबिटेशन से जो है ना वो हैबिटेंट उसके साथ इसको जो है ना वो मिक्सअप कर गया था. सो फॉर दैट आई अपोलोजाइज. द नेक्स्ट पॉइंट इज द लीडरशिप टास्क्स एट ईच स्टेज. दैट the leadership tasks at each stage, and who will lead at each stage, that as we are going to talk about, and we are talking about stages of change. So at each stage leadership role will be decided. Seventh point is the nature of the support needed at each stage, that what is the support which is required at each stage. Eighth point is the criteria for evaluating the success of each stage, that it will be decided that evaluation will be done at every stage, that how successful it is. So thus the lecture have been completed, and we have discussed the nature of change and stages of change. So I hope that you have also understood stages of change, that is 3.2 from the unit 3rd from the course outline. And I am hopeful that you really will learn from this lecture about the elements of change, and you will talk easily about the elements as well as the nature of change. In the end, I would like to say you that you were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? That कि आप जो है ना वो अल्लाह ने आपको अगर पर दे के पैदा किया है तो आपको क्या ज़रूरत है कि आप ज़िंदगी में रेंगते फिरें। तो मेरा तो आपके लिए यही पैगाम है कि यू शुड वर्क हार्ड, you should use your potential to the optimum, the maximum optimum level. You should identify your strengths, your passion. So you were born with wings. Why prefer to crawl through life? You have to work hard, you work smart, you have to learn all these things, and you have to learn about your subject. You read it again and again. I will upload all the PDF lectures as well as PowerPoint, if possible, slides, as I use PDF as your handouts for you. So you should learn those very diligently and get through this subject with success. God bless you. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum.